Hello, everyone. So today we have Samantha from Toronto, and she's currently a student at the Naturopathic School of Medicine in Canada. And the reason why I brought a student on this call versus, all the doctors we've been having is because A, she's had experience with chronic illness, and students are so underrated, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I feel like students have the freshest content. They have the most advanced advice, and they know like what's going on. I mean, I've spoken with a lot of doctors who have had 30, 40 years of experience, but they are not knowledgeable when it comes to your genes or any of these autoimmune conditions, and they keep using the same protocol that they've been using for years to help many of their patients. And it's worked on, those patients, but when you have new technology, when you have new ways of doing things that makes your life a lot easier, then you need people like Samantha to bring you that fresh content. So welcome, Samantha. I want to introduce you, and I know you've also dealt with chronic illness, and maybe you can start out with your story.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here. So many years ago, before entering into the healthcare and alternative healthcare space, I pursued teaching. So I'm actually an Ontario certified teacher, and was originally going to pursue a professional career in high school art, teaching high school art and English. So I did that for a couple of years, but prior to making the switch, I had done a teaching placement. And there I went to Ecuador to do this teaching placement. And it was an amazing opportunity, of course, as you can imagine. But I'll never forget my first day teaching. As we were driving to the school, I had to get them to open the van door, and I was so sick. So I threw up outside of the van, and that day of teaching was a complete write-off. I was sick to my stomach, and I've never felt that sick before. And so, of course, immediately after that, everything sort of changed. I had very severe gastrointestinal issues, just like, loose stools, uncomfortable bloating, and it was not like me. It was not my symptom picture prior to going to Ecuador. So when I got back to my hometown, I sought out a doctor, of course, and asked him what his opinion was. So I got referred to a gastroenterologist, and there I got a diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. And that was confusing because at the time, they would diagnose IBS based on a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning that they didn't know what else to diagnose it as, so they label it as IBS. Nowadays, when you get a diagnosis of IBS, it's a diagnosis of inclusion, and there is inclusion criteria, but we'll get back to that in a second. So I got the diagnosis of IBS, and then I pursued my teaching career, but at the same time, I was, trying to make money. So teaching during the day, 8:30 to 3:30 or whatever the school day looks like, and then bartending and serving in restaurants at night. So just really hustling, like, so many women do. And it's, the more I learn about, working with circadian rhythm and understanding our bodies and the natural cycle and how connected we are to nature, I really realized that hustle is important, and ambition is important, and motivation is important, but we have to be doing it in line with our hormonal cycle, and also honoring these pillars of health that I've now come to identify within a day's worth of work. So as you can imagine, working just nonstop, I was definitely not nourishing myself to the degree that I should have been, especially now knowing what real nourishment looks like. Surviving off of coffee, because of course that's an appetite suppressant, and when you're trying to go and get stuff done, it's a great way to get energy without having to stop for a meal. And eventually I became all my cycles were getting really irregular. I was getting cystic acne. My hair was falling out. I was very confused because I never had hormonal issues before. And it was just a testament to the stress that my body was under. Went to the doctor again, and I got a diagnosis of PCOS, and I was shocked because I did not see it coming. Nobody in my family currently or even at the time was diagnosed with PCOS, though now looking back, I would say it's more of a novel diagnosis for women in 2020 and the era that we're living in. I think that there were definitely patterns or symptoms of PCOS in my mom and even in other family members. But yeah, that really shook me to the core because I was like, oh no, like I don't have hormonal control of my health and things were spiraling down. And traditionally, I was always very interested in health, but I never made that connection that stress could really induce dis-ease. But that really, led me to pursue naturopathic medicine. I also have a nutrition diploma, so I'm very fortunate to have that and to be able to practice alternative, they say, or holistic healing while I'm in naturopathic medical school. But yeah, that really led me to work with women who are struggling with PCOS. I work with women who are struggling with infertility, but maybe haven't got an infertility diagnosis per se. They've just been really trying to have a baby and it hasn't necessarily worked. And we help to regulate their cycles. We help to get rid of the cystic acne, to promote hair growth, and to just feel better in their bodies. But every day, it's still something that I deal with and something that I'm constantly experimenting on myself as sort of that N=1 and trying to try stuff out so that I can speak to the effectiveness of whether it's a product or a lifestyle technique. And yeah, that's my story. And I'm so happy to be working with women and having that opportunity.
That's incredible. And one thing I noticed was that no matter what was going on in your life, you kind of you didn't let this PCOS and this illness define you. It didn't give you an excuse to say, hey, I can't pursue my dreams. It was actually the reason why you're doing what you're doing, which is incredible. And a lot of women out there who are struggling with these illnesses, they still do not understand their path. They still do not make the connection. And as a healer that you're becoming, you made that connection through this illness, which is an amazing thing. Especially dealing with autoimmune conditions, there's a lot of uncertainty, it's like you never know when it's going to come back. You never know if you have it. You have to go through so much to get the diagnosis you did. And for a little bit there, even when I had Hashimoto's, I was reading about all these other conditions because, I noticed that autoimmune conditions come in pairs. So I thought, okay, well, what else can I be having? Because I just could not believe that all my symptoms were coming from this one condition called Hashimoto's. So I looked into PCOS. I looked into the other 80 conditions, 100 conditions of autoimmune that are out there. And I noticed that, maybe I do have this. And every doctor I went to, they're like, oh, no, you don't, because you're not obese. And I'm like, well, that's just one symptom of many, So, yeah. And I love how you used natural healing methods to recover from this, to overcome this. And maybe you can go into that a little more, because the women who have Hashimoto's that I deal with on a daily basis are feeling fatigued, even though they have a clean diet. A lot of them are, they eat keto, or they have, anti-inflammatory diet that they're following, or they have some sort of diet which is extremely clean, no processed food. And is there a right way to do this or not really?
Yeah, it's so interesting because as you can imagine, I get a diagnosis of PCOS. First of all, it was so interesting. So I did come back with cysts on my ovaries, and that indicates that ovulation didn't occur. But I didn't have any blood markers that would have suggested a diagnosis of PCOS. And so that was why I was really shocked when I actually got it, because I had known of PCOS as this very typical, like, oh, you have to be overweight and you have to eat tons and tons of sugar and eat really poorly. And that's definitely not the case. But because my blood markers were fine, of course, my doctor didn't really know, like, he wasn't going to put me on metformin. He wasn't going to do things to control my blood sugar if my blood sugar was fine. And of course, the only solution was the birth control pill, just to take over the entire hormonal response of a woman's system. And I'm definitely not anti-birth control. I think that it can be empowering for women for the purpose of birth control, but it is not a resolution for getting to the root of a hormonal issue. So I knew I had to take matters into my own hands because birth control wasn't an option for me personally. And I did work for a long time on the PCOS specifically. So I did personally things like inositol, omega-3 fatty acids. Zinc was a really big part of my protocol that I'll use with other clients now as well. And I was taking a lot of probiotics because I still had this underlying gut issue, which I had been diagnosed as IBS. So for a very, very long time, I was, doing a lot of things. I mentioned a couple supplements for PCOS, but I knew there was a stress component. So I was working on my adrenal glands, magnesium, other types of herbs that support the stress response. There was tons of things I was doing. And it was really great because a couple of years later, I went for an ultrasound and the cysts were gone. I had also done acupuncture and castor oil packs. And I think that everything, as well as, having a lot of good sleep and eating nourishing meals and adding back in nutrients were supportive, but I definitely wasn't feeling 100% because there was this gut issue. As I got into naturopathic medical school and learning more about IBS and even the PCOS IBS connection, I realized that, these are not diagnoses that are to be, standing alone. They are woven together and they are connected in some capacity. And that really gave me an interest in learning about what is the connection between PCOS and IBS. And there's a large percentage of women that have PCOS that do have gastrointestinal issues. So I then went on to realize, well, it's inflammation in the gut that is causing this inflammatory syndrome, which that is exactly what PCOS is. So I said, what is going on with my gut? Once and for all, like, I'm not going to just accept that I have this thing that, is giving me, just lots and lots of bloating, infrequent bowel movements. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. So a couple months ago, I, invested in a gut test. And this is after I had done many gut protocols in order to get to the root of my gut issues. But this gut test did identify that I had H. pylori, and it made so much sense to me that something came up because I knew that my gut symptoms happened after I traveled to South America. I could pinpoint the date when I started to feel this dis-ease in my body. And so I knew that it wasn't just the mind-gut connection, though that's definitely important and that definitely exists. I knew that there was something, lying within me that was causing me to have these issues. And H. pylori is known to change the pH of stomach acid. So it actually reduces the acidity that makes it very difficult to digest food. And of course, H. pylori lives in the stomach. And that's really the first opportunity for food to get sterilized and for food to be broken down. So without proper amounts of stomach acid and stomach acid secretion, this food was traveling down my gastrointestinal tract, just getting, being the food for other bacteria that were living in my gut. So that's why I was experiencing a lot of bloating and a lot of other issues. But that is a good segue to talk about, why hydrochloric acid is so important, and potentially maybe my hydrochloric acid was depleted when I got the infection in Ecuador. And how do we deplete hydrochloric acid? It's severe amounts of stress, lots and lots of go, not eating in a proper environment, eating when you're in your car, for example, things like that make us more susceptible to infection, that are going to deplete these things that our body already has in store to ward off disease and to combat these pathogens. So if there is a connection with PCOS, there's certainly a connection with Hashimoto's and other autoimmune conditions. There are known pathogens that are specifically implicated in things like Hashimoto's as well. So, I think the value of a gut test is just that you can pinpoint the pathogens that are implicating the disease. But anytime there's an autoimmune issue, we have to be looking to the gut. We have to be looking to the immune system. And 80% of your immune system is in your gut.
That's so true. And I remember mine, when I had Hashimoto's, I was in Bali, and I was sick to my stomach one day, and I could not figure out, like, it was just the same scenario of like this food poisoning. And so I was like, I took 2-3 days off, and I didn't go out or anything. And then, all of a sudden I started feeling these like mono symptoms of fatigue, and like, and I knew something was going on. And I think that was the sign that, that's when this triggered this, that's when the response and the inflammation happened. And after that, I started getting flus and colds, and, I was very susceptible to anything. So, it's a known thing that viruses, infections, bacteria, all of these things live in our body. They live on everybody's body, and it's just a matter of fixing your body so it can control these things in a way that your body can release toxins. And by fixing your body and fixing your immune system, you're preparing it to be able to fight these things off, so they don't control your body and they don't set off fires. And for me, like, diet was, I think it was maybe a fifth of everything that I had tried. And even though I follow like an anti-inflammatory diet, I know a lot of people follow all sorts of diets, and they're like, they stick to them like it's very religious, and I feel like it's some cases it's great to do that, but in other cases you may be doing more harm than good. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think that there's so many different schools of thought on what diet is the best, right? And so I think it does involve a lot of experimenting on yourself and being honest with yourself. There is my sassy dog in the background. But being honest with yourself, right? Like, if you're doing a diet for 3 months or 6 months and you're not feeling better or seeing changes on blood work, or blood work is indicative of changes. You can get, your point A and point B, and you can compare them, but how are you feeling? How are you sleeping? What is your menses like? What is your sex drive like? What are your energy levels like throughout the day? These are all also markers of health that we sometimes miss or forget about because we're so caught up in the lab work and the blood work. But if your diet is not making you feel energized, if your diet is making you feel constipated or bloated or whatever, you're doing intermittent fasting and you're feeling super fatigued and your blood sugar's all over the place, then that's not for you. And you have to be honest with that. And it can be challenging because I feel like diet also means community, right? When you put a label on something and you say, I'm paleo, well, now you belong to this community of paleo people. And this is not to, speak poorly of the paleo diet. It works for people, right? But I'm just saying that can be difficult. If you are paleo and you should be Mediterranean, it's hard to make that switch if people have really identified with it and found a community with it. And community is so important to the healing aspect. So it's really, it's weighing the pros and cons, but it's also being honest with yourself and being okay to say, I'm shifting and I'm moving with the season of life that I'm in and honoring what my body needs. I mean, I've read so many books and I've learned about so many different diets, and there's a case for all of them, right? There's a case for every single one. And so to say like one diet specifically is the best, I mean, I could rank them and say this is my potentially what I think, but some people don't handle legumes and lectins as good as other people, right? So maybe the Mediterranean diet isn't for them. Other people don't really digest red meat or other meat products super well, so maybe paleo isn't for them. So it's really about being honest with yourself, doing the trial and error, because you can get recommendations from practitioners and they're going to give you the best information that they have and only what they know, but the body will tell you exactly what it needs when you do that trial and error. You just need to really tune in and listen.
That's very insightful because even with my conditions, I used muscle testing to understand, what was going on a deeper level, like from a standpoint of why am I not healing from what I have? And is it really a thyroid issue or is it something else? And there were other things involved, like my pituitary gland, like my adrenal gland, that were not being addressed with simply thyroid medication. And that's when I started to question everything, because I said, okay, here's a doctor that's like a fanatic about the thyroid medication. And here's a muscle tester that's saying my thyroid isn't the problem. I mean, what is the real problem here? And that's kind of the same thing with food. I mean, you can work with two different nutritionists. They'll give you two different nutrition plans and you may eat the stuff and you're just like, no, like this is not good for me. I worked with several personal trainers and they also gave me they told me I had to eat 6 meals a day with, fish every single meal and carbs every single meal. And I realized I was overloading my body with those types of meals, that amount, and just eating that much meat. It was, my processing system didn't allow for that. And it was that mind-body connection, like you said. So, sometimes it's like creating this oneness between your mind and your body and your soul. And I think that's a lot of what these illnesses are teaching us to do in a way. And with the nutrition, it's like, yeah, you can take supplements, but do these supplements, are they like the end all be all? And maybe you can talk to that a little bit, because I've had some experience with supplements, but I can't tell you that there was one magic pill out there.
Yeah, no, there's not going to be a quick fix to any illness. But I agree with you. I agree that when you experience this disease or this imbalance, it is your greatest teacher, and you become, more attuned with your body and more educated on your body than the person next to you who feels okay. But we have to acknowledge that that is empowering, that now you know all of this information about yourself because of this journey that you've gone through. But to go back on supplements, I mean, that's what they're called. They're called a supplement, right? They supplement our diet and our lifestyle. And I mean, I don't know what I would place more emphasis on, probably maybe potentially diet, but lifestyle is so important too. And so many people will come to me or ask me, what do I take for this symptom? And I ask them, it could be like, what do I take for sleep? And I say, well, what are you doing throughout the day, right? That is encouraging that sleep, right? And I know so many people are interested in entrepreneurs and their morning routine, right? Like, how do you make a productive day? Well, your productive day begins at night, right? Like what does your nighttime routine look like? So I always say there are pillars of health, and we need to master those, and diet is one of them, but other things are, sleep and getting outside in nature and getting that exposure to natural sunlight, because that's going to wake you up, but it's also going to completely reset that circadian rhythm so that you can actually sleep better at night as well. Things like, human connection, drinking enough water. There are so many of those foundational aspects of health that people, haven't really mastered, and they want to add on or incorporate a supplement. But first, they need to really master those foundational aspects. So yeah, that's my thought on supplements, but I do think they can be helpful. They can help to move the needle, right? In my case with PCOS and in other clients that I've treated, I love incorporating inositol. I find that is so powerful for shifting the menstrual cycle. We've talked about it being a good product to help regulate the menstrual cycle, and it does so many other things as well. In terms of decreasing the amount of acne that somebody might be experiencing. It helps to decline or get rid of some of the excess testosterone, so it can really help with hair loss and things like that. So while those foundational aspects are going to be important, there are also deficiencies that come with the disease. So this is where supplements can be really helpful to add on if the individual needs it.
You're so right. And I just kind of want to show this because, this is what I've been using.
One sec, I'm not sure why, but I can't hear you. Let me unplug these.
So this is a supplement that I've been using, and I've been using it just for a month because, like I said, I was facing those PCOS symptoms. And even with Hashimoto's, I had like an irregular cycle. And one of the pillars of good health, an acupuncturist told me, was having a regular menstrual cycle. And when your menstrual cycle is off, it's basically telling you, hey, like you need to go like put your body in check because something is off. So I read about this supplement, and I took it twice a day for a month, and it regulated me again. I stopped losing hair because the androgens sort of just decreased, and I started to get everything back to normal and balanced again. And is that something that you see a lot with the patients that you work with?
Yeah, I find, inositol is usually one of the number one things that I do like to recommend for women with PCOS. But it is so important to get to the root of it. And there's been so many different root causes for PCOS, and that leads women to have a very broad phenotype of the diagnosis, right? There's so many different versions of it, which is why I was confused and you may have been confused, like this isn't PCOS and what I know of it. So while I do love it, it's probably my favorite product because I've worked with clients before, and just by putting them on that one product, their periods became regular, very similar experience to you, and they became heavier because hers was quite scanty. So that was really, really, really great in this one scenario that I'm thinking of. I remember we were working on weight loss and regulating the cycle, but weight loss was her number one goal. Regulating the cycle was my number one goal. And so when I checked in with her, she was talking about her weight loss and feeling so good. And I said, and what about your period? And she was like, oh yeah, like it came right on time and it wasn't scanty anymore. And I was like, there we go. Like these are huge wins. So I love, love, love that product. But I also think it's so important to get to the root of the PCOS. So if it is, a high insulin, high glucose type picture, we need to bring that down. Inositol can be helpful for that, but there's also so many other dietary things that I would do in a case like that. There's an adrenal picture, PCOS. So that's really where I want to look at the lifestyle, resetting that circadian rhythm, making sure they're going to bed at the same time every night, ideally around 10 or 11, and getting a good solid night's sleep in a really nice dark room, waking up around the same time every day, and letting light wake them up, not letting coffee wake them up. Yeah, and I mean, there's so many different pictures that we could dissect. Like in my case, I'm sure that it was an inflammatory / adrenal picture. And so that was really important for me to look at the gut and heal my gut and just cool the fires that were going out in my gastrointestinal tract in order for the rest of my body to just say, and just breathe.
Yeah, I mean, you know, with all 4 of my conditions, I think it started with the adrenals being depleted, and that's what kind of set off that fight or flight response. And then the gut was always the issue ever since I was a kid. Like I noticed, you know, after I grew older, I'm like connecting the dots, and it started when I was like a baby, and I would literally, like during Halloween, I would eat like that whole bag of chocolates. And, you know, I'm like, I think about it, I'm like, oh, wow, I consumed a lot of bad food that completely must have destroyed my gut. So
wild to think back on it. And, you know, I feel like we are in such a wonderful age where we have information at our fingertips. We have practitioners who know more than ever about the gut microbiome and its influence on our entirety of health. And it's really only just beginning, but I definitely, I look back on some of the things that my parents let us eat or whatever, and just not knowing that these things were absolutely destroying the gut and impacting the what am I trying to say? Causing leaky gut. So it's amazing now that we do have this information and we can leave and feel empowered.
Absolutely. And I mean, we were talking about a client you had, for example, the one that, you know, took a similar supplement to this and felt a different world of difference, and ended up losing weight and also getting her cycle back. Were there other like case studies that you can share with us, and, you know, how people have been able to get their life back with these sort of conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked with a client. I mean, there's so many, because especially if they're coming from like a standard American diet, or they really truly don't know the foods that fuel their body. But there's one in particular I have worked with that came to me with very, very heavy periods, lots of pain on the first day of her menstrual cycle, and had also been trying to conceive, but that wasn't working for her and her husband. But yeah, we completely changed her diet. In her case, we needed to remove some meat, add in lots and lots of vegetables to really reduce the inflammation that was going on in the uterus, and to clear out the estrogens that would have been accumulating in her system as a result of a lot of meat consumption and a lot of other things. I mean, estrogen mimickers are everywhere. So that involved looking at her personal care products and the cleaning products that she was using, the environmental toxins that she was exposed to. And yeah, in time, she similarly lost weight, because estrogen also triggers an insulin response. So that helps, or not helps, but it hinders weight loss, and it really causes us to hold on to our fat cells, and for those fat cells to actually get bigger. So she ended up losing some weight and becoming fertile. But most importantly, I mean, fertility is obviously a huge win, but don't forget, like, to have a monthly cycle, that's every single month, right? So to be able to reduce the pain that she was experiencing, that was a major win for her as well.
Wow. And that's the other thing, like, you know, some people they may have these PCOS symptoms, other people may have like these estrogen dominant symptoms, and they all come down to like basically reducing inflammation and getting that body back to a regular balance again, where it can function. Because a lot of women, you know, they come to me and they come with the symptoms, like similarly like your clients do, and they say, hey, I want to lose weight. I want to get my hair back. I don't want it to thin. And with me, it was like, I mean, if I shared my story, I mean, people can have compassion for it, but my story belongs to just me. It's not like they can use my protocol and heal themselves. And that's what I've seen with a lot of these case studies and different stories, is that women want to look good, feel great, and that's their end goal, but they don't realize what is really going inside their bodies. And you may have the goal of getting a regular cycle back when the client has the goal of losing weight. How do you work with that mindset, of like getting a person to really see inside of themselves and work on becoming a healthier version of who they are?
It's a fine line, because you want them to feel good about what they're investing in, right? Because at the end of the day, I am a service to somebody, and I want to honor that. I want to respect the fact that they have their goals. So for me, I do want to work on their number one goal, but there's always the underlying background, this is what I want. But I put their goals, I guess, like ahead of mine, if I want to spin it that way. But for the sole reason that they have come to me with that yearning, and that's what they want. So that's important, because that's also their motivation piece, right? They might not be motivated by regulating their cycle or making their cycle a better flow, right? They are more motivated by maybe the number that they see on the scale, or the person that they see in the mirror. And so it's important for me to honor that in people, and respect that that's what they want. But oftentimes you kind of can't do one without the other anyways, right? I see, in particularly in this case with weight loss, like weight is often a symptom of something. So when I work on those symptoms, the weight will fall off, but other things start to fall into place as well. But it can be challenging, right? When the congruency between the practitioner and the client are not aligned. But it's important, in my opinion, to really honor like what that person wants out of working with me as well. That being said, if somebody came to me with the sole intention of weight loss, I'm very honest about, I'm not here for quick fixes, right? Like, I want to do this in a way that's going to be sustainable for you. I want to do it in a way that you're going to keep this weight off, because we've addressed the reason why your weight is the way that it is to begin with, right? And maybe that's an underlying gut issue. Maybe that's inflammation. Maybe it's just the relationship with the food, but that does need to be addressed in order for that weight to stay off, and for those lifestyle changes to be sustainable and maintained. Because a diet is just that, right? It's something that you think, okay, I've done it in 30 days, but with weight loss, you really need to change. It means that something wasn't working for you. So you need to now change that thing, or those things collectively, and create a new lifestyle for yourself.
Absolutely. And it's so right when you say, like, people have to kind of understand their lifestyles and change things to match their lifestyle, in a way that it's not like restrictive to them, in a way that it's not a chore to them, right? Mm-hmm. Because this is something that they'll have to live with their entire life in order to maintain these results. And I think with the fat and like even the weight loss, it's the question of, what do you fix first? Do you fix these hormones first? Do you fix the gut first? Like, do you do HRT and sort of kind of get these hormones balanced? Because the end goal is to get everything balanced again. But I mean, I think a lot of people are confused as like, what should they do? And should they just take a dim supplement, or, do these supplements that fix your hormones, or do they suffer their hormones and fix their gut?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a question like in terms of what would I do, I I think it's a matter of kind of going back to the previous question, what is most important to that person? Like, what is the worst symptom that they're experiencing? Like, let's get rid of that first. And it might come back if we don't do these other things. So let's get rid of it and make you feel a little bit better. And then we can slowly do these other things that are going to help maintain that, whether it's pain-free or fertility or, hair growth or whatever it is. I mean, Hippocrates was coined for saying all disease starts and ends in the gut. I believe this. I believe that our gut, if it's a perfect protocol and somebody's going to be perfectly compliant, I'd love to look at the gut first and work on that and get them having a really good, bowel movement every single day and not feeling constipated, not feeling bloated, right? I don't think I've met a client who I've had that hasn't had some type of digestive issue. So ideally, we're doing some really supportive gut healing first and foremost. But at the end of the day, it's also important for people to feel a little bit better and have their quality of life improved on a day-to-day experience. And also acknowledge, it's kind of made me think of something I actually read today, and it's that no one today is really disease-free. No one is in perfectly good health, right? And the thing is that we can still be healthy with a diagnosis or with PCOS, right? We really can be. It doesn't, just because we have it doesn't necessarily mean that we are not healthy. But it's, again, looking at those markers of health. What is your menstrual cycle like? What is your hair like? What is your libido like? What is your energy like? If those are good, maybe those are our determinants of health, and that's how we then identify whether or not we are healthy. But using this idea of the absence of disease, it's interesting because there seems to be something with everyone.
Right. And some people are good at hiding it really well, and other people don't even know they have it. And I also read something where 90% of the world is probably walking around with an autoimmune condition undiagnosed, and
Exactly.
that's it's a sad thing when you look at it, but it's also something to feel grateful for if you have been diagnosed, because it takes so long to get a diagnosis for a single autoimmune condition.
Exactly. I think if you receive the diagnosis and there's research in that diagnosis and there's protocols or at least some level of information out there that you can seek out to improve your health, like, that's so empowering. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And I want to respect your time today because you've given us so much great insight. And I know you have many other things to do, but maybe you can just leave us with 3 key takeaways that could help these women get started.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say because of my personal connection to, having my story, it would be, identify those pillars of health for you and master them, like make sure you're getting to sleep every single night around the same time. Honor that. Give yourself self-care. Drink your water. Some of those basic things are so impactful to our health. Getting outside in nature and getting green space and sunlight, that would be one message that I would love for people to take away, that without mastering those pillars of health, then the other things are going to be a lot more difficult to make an impact, right? Supplements will be so much more powerful if we have these other pillars of health already in place. I always say, we didn't talk a lot about it, but to eat the fruit, I feel that fruit has really been demonized, and I'm such a proponent of eating nutrient dense food, and fruit is one of the things on this earth that is so nutrient dense, full of fiber, water, vitamins, minerals, that your biochemistry just eats up. No pun intended. And the last one, I don't know, maybe have a sense of, community. And I think it's so amazing that you're offering that, because I know that when I got my diagnoses, I felt so alone. I felt like I couldn't tell anybody. There was such a level of shame. And now I feel the opposite because I've felt supported. I've, opened up to people about it. I've talked about it. I've created my own community. And people need that. They need to feel like this is normal. It's common, and I can find a commonality in someone else because of this, and we can go through this together. And that's really important. So thank you for doing that for your community and for having me here and being a part of it.
Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and all this amazing insight. And you're right, the community aspect is so important, because even with me, I felt extremely alone, and we have friends, we have family members, but they don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to maneuver through this journey of health when you don't have the answers. And even if Google is your best friend, it's only works so well for certain things, so it's more comforting to know that there's someone else that has it, that's healing, that's on this journey with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so great that you've done this for so many women and that they have a place to share their experience.
Of course, thank you. And Samantha, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they contact you?
The best way to find me is on Instagram. I'm at Samantha Van De Wal, and maybe we can type it in for them. So that's my Instagram handle, and that's really where I hang out. It's where I find, most of the ladies that are that eventually come into my community. And from there, you can get a link to my website, samanthavaندewal.com. I'm currently updating it, so don't be, afraid if you go there and it's just a website in progress, but that'll be done soon. And from the Instagram, you can also send me an email anytime or send me a message. I'd be so happy to connect with everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show today, Samantha.
Thank you so much for having me.